I'm literally on fire right now. I just got off the phone with my wife, who took my 9 and 7-year-old boys to the doctor today to get physicals for tackle football and school next year and all that other shit. My 9-year-old son went in first, and the first thing this woman asks him is if he identifies as a boy, a girl, gender fluid, or non-binary. My son, he's never heard of any of that shit before. You've been dealing with him your whole life. He is clearly a boy's boy. So what are you, trying to plant a seed in his head? The only thing I could be thankful for is that my wife took them instead of me. And props to my wife, because she said something. And if she didn't, they would have asked my 7-year-old son the same damn question. This shit is ridiculous. And to the people out there to think that there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm just a transphobe or all that shit, you're f***ed up. This is bullshit. And there's something wrong with you.
All right, Sarah, your thoughts.
I think, I feel for this guy, because this is what we're seeing. I mean, his children should never, doctors don't need to ask this question, right? For such a small population, if something changes in there and somebody identifies differently than what you think, then it's up to them to bring it to you. Like, he's absolutely right. Like, they planted this, like, are you a boy or a girl? It's like, a child who has never questioned that is going to start questioning it. It's going to be like, wait, I thought I've always been a boy, but what do you mean? Am I a boy or a girl? And so I think it was very inappropriate on, the doctor's part. And this is something that parents have a right to teach their children about. This is the same thing we see at schools, we see it everywhere else. It's like everybody wants to inject gender ideology onto other people, and they don't realize, they think that, and I wouldn't doubt if this doctor thought they were doing the right thing. This is something that they've kind of been instructed by, their guidance that they get from like higher organizations, but it's a sign of a larger problem that is with the full medical organization. So maybe, this doctor, again, if you've been seeing these children for their whole lives, then why would you think that anything has changed if they've never expressed any difference in the past either? So I understand where this guy's coming from.
Yeah, I think I want to give the individual doctor in question a little bit of grace, in that I have a little bit of insight into how this stuff works. They may have been told from up above that they must ask this question to their patients. And so I do think, though, it is an inappropriate question. It shouldn't be asked to young children. I understand the dad being upset about it. But what I'll say is like, with an actually gender dysphoric child, right? Blair White has been on this show, and she's talked about how as young as 5 years old, she can remember feeling like a girl and feeling like trapped in the wrong body. They don't need it planted in their head. They don't need it suggested. They don't need to be asked about it. They will come to you and say, I'm really a girl, right? And so I have a lot of compassion for the kids who struggle with gender dysphoria and the parents that have to make these really tough decisions and have gone down these medical pathways that we're now realizing more and more that kids shouldn't be going down, but they were told by doctors that they should. I have a lot of sympathy for those situations. But those situations don't require this kind of thing being pushed on every kid. They simply don't, because those will emerge naturally. And instead, this kind of thing is only going to trigger backlash to trans people, and it's only going to confuse some kids, usurp parents' rights to talk about this stuff with their kids on their time and when they're ready. And it's just going to, I think, on net be much worse for the trans community and trans acceptance than it is going to promote it, which is what I assume their intention is. So at the bare minimum, it just seems totally misguided to me. And look, I understand that why the dad would be upset.
Yeah, and Blair has had the same experience as me. I knew from the age of 4 years old that something was different about me, and that I didn't necessarily feel like I was a girl, but I knew I wanted to know what it was like to be a girl. Like, that's where it was. Like, I had a draw to be a girl. And so you're right. Like, these children don't need it implanted into their head. They will come to you if that's something that they're feeling, or they'll hide it like I did my entire life. But, but we're in a situation where that's not necessarily the case anymore. Children are coming out and saying this younger and younger. Almost every transsexual that I know that's happy with their transition later in life knew at a very young age, but I always kind of conflate it to, a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square, because we have a high population of children that come out so early and say, I'm a girl, or I'm a boy, or the opposite sex, And we also know that like 88% of those will end up just going on and living their lives after they get through puberty. So that's why it's exactly what you said. Now, I think that I give a lot of people a lot of grace in these areas. Like you said, the doctor is probably being told from higher, this is what you have to do to take care of this is what you have to do to patients. This is what you have to do here. I think there's a lot of people that are being misled down a road of acceptance that they don't necessarily know, but they want to be compassionate towards children who are having distress with their biological sex. And so they're kind of going along, and it's kind of like they're not perpetually online. They don't know all the studies, so they're just being told this. And so they're like, okay, well, this is the way that we, show compassion towards people like this. And so I do give some of these doctors a lot of grace, like you said, because they're probably not even making that decision. She probably didn't even realize why it might be a inappropriate question. There was a hearing on the bill in Louisiana, which we're trying to get past still, that one of the school teachers in there said, when one of the kids asked me about my gender identity, I came out as they, them. Five other students came to me afterwards. Am I supposed to just tell them that I can't talk to them about this? And it's like, yes, you don't realize that you literally just planted this seed into their head. And that's kind of where I think a lot of people are. They don't realize that they might be introducing a concept into these children, and they're taking it into a way that is not actually accurate for what they're feeling, but like a lot of children see it as a way to be accepted into certain spaces. A lot of children see it, especially in schools.
Kids are really impressionable.
Well, and when you think about it, it's like kids get bullied. So, and a lot of the kids that are transitioning, we have a high population of autism in it. So they're not, they have issues socially adapting sometimes when you're on the spectrum, and so sometimes they become outcast. And so what's a way to kind of get protection when you're an outcast? Identify into a category that you've already seen that the teachers accept. And so now you get special protection and special, almost special access to teachers. Those teachers will now like take you under their wing and protect you in certain aspects. And then you have acceptance. And so always linking it kind of to like the goth kids, the scene kids. It's always kind of more the outcast kids. It's not the cheerleaders that are transitioning. It's kind of more the kids that don't belong somewhere and are generally bullied. And so they're the ones that are kind of getting put into the situations and then set down these roads to irreversible harm. And so I think society needs to take a step back, especially when it comes to the children, which is why we are trying to do stuff across the country to protect the children. But I actually had a friend one time ask me about pronouns the same way. And they said, well, do you think if we got used to asking everybody their pronouns, because I said as a transsexual person that's taking the steps of transition, it actually gives me dysphoria if somebody asks me my pronouns, right? Like you should know like what my pronouns are just by my appearance and the way I present myself. And they said, well, do you think that would still be the case if we asked everybody their pronouns? I said, I don't think it's reasonable to ask everybody to make this exception for a very small, like less than 1% of the population. Like I said, if you identify as something different, it is on you to tell other people how you identify. Like if you can't tell, like I identify as a woman, then, that's on me to be like, to correct you if you make an error. Like that's as simple as it is. And I don't think I definitely don't think people should be like asking kids, like, are you a boy or a girl? Like, it's based on their sex. Come on now.
Yeah, and the
They're
rare,
playing
rare
football.
exceptions where that kid has some gender confusion, they will have that organically. They won't need that suggested
Exactly.
to them. So I think it's super misguided. I understand this dad's being upset. And unfortunately, I do think this kind of overreach, pushing stuff on kids, is part of what's causing the backlash to trans people and to the LGBT community at large, which I'm very concerned about because I want tolerance for everybody. But we are seeing a decline in support for LGBT rights and acceptance. And we are seeing a backlash against even trans adults living their lives how they please. And I think it's in part because of stuff like this and the pendulum swinging back. And I'm pretty concerned about that.
I agree. Yeah. There is a huge backlash happening against our community. And you know, it doesn't help. And it doesn't help. I think a lot of I think the community as a whole needs to step up and stand out against this stuff. Like it's why do we see so much of like the stuff happening at prides? Like the sexual deviancy at prides is a huge example of this. It's like that's what's being shown, but there's not nearly enough people, especially on the left, that are standing up against this. There was a Harvard-Harris poll maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago now that showed even 67% of Democrats are against the medicalization of minors. And so that should be something that should be pushed further and harder. Yeah. I wrote that up. I wrote an article on it for the Post Millennial. I was actually writing an article about like the Trump Biden polls. And then I was looking through the poll and I go, wait a second, this is a story. This is a huge story that 67% of Democrats, and people are like, yeah, that's 33% that think it's okay. I'm like, yeah, but it's a lot lower than what we thought it was. And as well, 11% of Republicans think it's okay. So that's the thing is like, and actually it's like something like 73% of independents are against it. And so it's the same with like, it's like trans women in female sports is the same way. Like 73% of the population is against that. And so when you look at these polls and you see that society is completely going against it and they're blaming, you know, the LGBT community, like this is why, because it's not a popular idea even among Democrats. And so even Democrats are going to start like being like, we don't want anything to do with that population.